Don't cower. Like it. Well, welcome everybody. And today the topic is joy in the midst of hell. it's it's actually a happy topic. And I'm going to show you today how joy helps us reach our goals when hell seems to be breaking loose all around us. And this happens to all of us at times. Joy is our compass when we lose our way. Joy is our mental GPS that always stays focused on the goal, no matter how many times we get off course. Joy is a string that connects us with our future. And joy is the transparent heads-up display so that we never need to take our eyes off the road. This past week, my business partner had the opportunity to drive on a high-speed racetrack. And he drove a brand new black Lamborghini Hurricane. And the professional driver that was instructing him for his 3 laps was sitting in the passenger seat. And he told him, do not look at the speedometer when you get on it. He said at 200 miles an hour, we couldn't afford even a momentary distraction. Sometimes our life seems to be going 200 miles an hour. Things are hitting us, they're moving so fast, it's hard to keep up at times. And that's where we have to even work harder. And this word joy is going to really help us do that. You know, those little distractions sometimes cause us to hit the wall. And joy is not to be confused with happiness. Someone informed me yesterday. And joy is not happiness, but it sets the stage for it. Joy is far bigger. See, happiness happens when happy things happen to you. And you win the lottery, or you win a new car, or you find a new love, or you catch a glimpse of your first child. You're happy. If any of these things get taken away from you, you're sad. Happiness is good, but joy is crazy good. Joy is a decision repeated with direction. Joy is our victory cry as we run into our personal battles. Joy is an attitude. Joy anticipates the outcome. The Hebrew word for joy in the Old Testament is many times to be spoken at an ear-splitting volume. It's a shout of joy. It's saying yes when we face a challenge, but really meaning it. But it's a mindset. We have to train ourselves to be like this. We have to have a reason to think that we can conquer that particular problem. See, joy is peace under pressure. Joy gives us the ability to maintain a calm and delightful focus when all hell is breaking loose around us. Today we're going to focus on 3 people who practice the fine art of joy. We're going to talk about Jesus, Job, and Paul. And first we'll start with Jesus Christ. And his life opened with joy and ended with joy, his earthly life. See, joy surrounded the life of Christ. You don't have to turn there. I'm going to read these quick, but John 8:56 says, your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad. Abraham rejoiced and he saw Jesus Christ. How he did that? God had to show him some kind of special revelation. Helped him keep going. Matthew 2:10, when they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. Remember the wise men, the wise guys? They rejoiced with exceeding great joy. Luke 1:22, as soon As the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby in my womb leaped for joy. Future John the Baptist. Spirit of God even in the womb. Hebrews 12:2. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. See, joy helps our theme stay the theme. What's your theme? What's your purpose for being? Where are you going? What do you want to do? What do I want to do? See, joy must be huge for it to be the thing that kept Jesus focused when he was misunderstood, denied, rejected, spit upon, hated, beat, tortured, murdered, resurrected, and ascended. Who for the joy that was set before him. What is joy? Is joy just happiness on steroids? It's got to be something different. Who for the joy that was set before him. Joy is a mindset. Like I said, it's like that GPS in your car. No matter where you go, it's going to keep redirecting you to the goal that you plugged in there, right? So what's your goal? What have you plugged into your inner GPS? It's joy that's going to help us continue to get there. It's going to stay focused on that goal no matter what. If you ran your car off the road and turned it upside down, is the GPS still going to be working? Yeah. If you got electricity, right? And then if it was in the tow truck getting pulled, it's still going to keep trying to track to where you originally were wanting to go. If joy helped Jesus maintain a calm focus in the midst of his storm, it's going to help us too. See, joy is the calm and positive focus when all hell is breaking loose around us. And Jesus mastered that. Nothing got in the way of where he knew he had to go, where he knew he was going in his life and after this life. The hope. See, Job finds his joy. And the book of Job was probably the first book of the Bible that was ever written. And it was written by Moses. And it's got to contain truth and light and love and hope and joy, not to mention the spiritual connection that's available with the Creator. I mean, because there's a time where he is directly talking to and being talked to by God. It's pretty amazing. Job wasn't even really considered a person who's of the child of Abraham. He was an offshoot. You know, I mean, it's going to show the rise and fall of a person's personal empire, as well as our ability to rise up from the ashes of a wasted life. You know, and no matter how bad our life we've made our life, it can be better. It can get better. Job proved that. It's the first thing people ever read that was written by by Moses. Has to have all the stuff in there to help us live our life. It has to talk about the sheer power and the human condition. If any of you ever wondered when and where Job lived, a lot of researchers think that he was probably a contemporary of Moses. Little older, lived at the same time as Jethro, his father-in-law, who was also a prophet. So Job, according to Jewish lore, Job and Jethro were both considered Gentile prophets for the one true God. Isn't that wild? So Moses got help. Remember how he went to Jethro after leaving the promised land? Well, he also knew Job, or knew of Job. He knew the story of Job. Everybody would have known because it was all in that same area. That whole Eastern Mediterranean area. They all lived there. southeast. And Job was well known, and Job 1, I'm going to read 1 through 3 from The Voice, and it says, once there was a man from Uz by the name of Job, and he was a very good man, his character spotless, his integrity unquestioned. In fact, he so believed in God that he sought to honor him in all things. He deliberately avoided evil in all his affairs. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 teams of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and a large number of servants. Among Easterners, he was the most powerful and influential man. Moses knew who Job was. Everybody knew who Job was. We all know who the most powerful and influential and rich people on earth are. Just a handful. You hear about them all the time. But speaking of these, I was thinking about these with the 7,000 sheep they mentioned. So he had to have a clothing business as well as a food business with all those sheep. And speaking of sheep, did you read about that lost sheep that was recently found in the Australian scrubland? I think it was last week or the week before. And he had never been shorn before and yielded 89 pounds of wool. That's the equivalent of 30 sweaters. And shedding almost half of his body weight. It just looked like a cloud with legs. And a normal sheep produces about 11 pounds of wool each year. This one had never been shorn his whole life. And 11 pounds of wool is about 4 sweaters. And so if Job was a sweater guy and they shorn these things every year, think of 7,000 times 4, that's 28,000 sweaters each year for Job Inc. For Job Incorporated. I mean, that's a lot of sweaters. The 3,000 camels gave him a long-distance trucking business, an import-export business, not to mention a caravan security business. The 500 team of oxen were the heavy haulers and the farm tractors of the day. The 500 donkeys were his local trucking and distribution business. They just went short distances. They were also his Uber transportation service. People would use their cell phones and then call out an Uber donkey, and then it would come and they'd get to their location. Now verse 4 and 5 from the Message. His sons used to take turns hosting parties in their homes, always inviting their 3 sisters to join them in their merrymaking. When the parties were over, Job would get up early in the morning and sacrifice a burnt offering for each of his children, thinking, maybe one of them sinned by defying God inwardly. Job made a habit of this sacrificial atonement just in case they'd sinned. Just in case. They were grown kids, maybe a bit soft and spoiled, but business people in their own right. They were business people. Job worried about them and those darn parties. What were they doing in there? What were they doing? And it's a great lesson for us parents. Do the best you can, but don't beat yourself up if they don't turn out the way that you dreamed or you demanded. Did you? Every person must stand on their own 2 feet. Every adult stands on their own 2 feet. But it's hard to watch at times. Job allowed this untethered worry and fear to overpower his joy. Remember, joy is that focus. Joy is a decision. It's a focus. Job lost his peace when he forgot his joy. Chapter 3:25 tells us from the King James, "For the thing which I greatly feared is come upon me, and that which I was afraid of is come unto me. Verse 35 from The Voice said, what I feared most descends on me. My nightmare, now reality. The Message says, the worst of my fears has come true. What I dreaded most has happened. My repose is shattered. My peace destroyed. No rest for me ever. Death has invaded my life. Now, what had happened, I didn't describe earlier. He lost all his businesses. He lost 10 children, all his children. He lost everything, all his money, all his family, except for he and his wife. Imagine going from what today would be a billionaire to being homeless. See, as a prophet and minister and employer, he seemed to be able to help everyone, but he couldn't seem to help his own family. Hence the age-old story of a minister. And this drove him crazy because he focused on his personal problems and perceived self-lack. He lost all his business, all his wealth, all his 10 children, adult children in one day. And you think you've had a bad day. When Job lost his mojo, he lost his joy. When he lost his joy, he was lost. Remember that verse in Hebrews, who for the joy that was set before him he endured. We have to have something bigger than our problems that we hang on to, that we see. We have to see something clearer than the problems around us. See, happily the story ends well, and Job ended up with twice as much as he had before because God showed him and reminded him how to turn his fear into joy. In Job 33, verse 38, and let me see, out of the raging storm, this is chapter 38, verse 2, I'm sorry. Out of the raging storm, the Eternal One answered Job, Eternal One, who is this that darkens counsel, who covers over sound instruction with empty words void of knowledge? Now prepare yourself and gather your courage like a warrior. Prepare yourself for the task at hand. That's joy. What are we doing to prepare ourselves for the task at hand? Are we feeling like a victim? Sometimes we do. We've got to turn that back around. And I'm going to show you in this next section, when we talk about Paul, what he did to keep his head straight when he was literally in the midst of hell. The Message says, pull yourself together, Job. That's what God told him. Pull yourself together, Job. See, Job did pull it together. Job regained control of his mind and words and actions and forced them on and focused them on the greatness of God and the abundance that's available to any of us. You know, Mr. and Mrs. Job may have lost everything, their kids, their wealth, their employees, but they ended up with twice as much as they had the first time. How would you like to have twice as much? What's been taken from you? What have you given up? You can get it back. Like I said before, get your stack back. You can get it back. If Job can do it, you can do it. The principle's here. He changed his mind. He changed his focus. He changed his actions. He kept his mind locked on a goal. God talks about joy to him, which we'll get to a verse in a minute. You see, I mean, they had twice as much. Their friends and family gave them a financial kickstart. And then Mr. and Mrs. Job got busy making babies again. 10 more. 20 kids. 20 babies, same mom and dad. That's a lot of kids. I know Josephine's grandfather came from, 23 boys and 1 girl, same mom and dad. So they beat out Mrs. Job by a little bit. But that's Italian. Forget about it. And when Job refocused his mind and remembered the Creator and pinned down his thoughts to think only the positives, and this is hard to do, think only the positives, he prospered. Only the positives about yourself. Only what you can glean the positives out of that bad situation. There is something you can learn. There's a way to stay focused within it. A joyful focus will direct your thoughts through any problem, any storm. Hebrews 12:2 from the Amplified. I've read this already before, but this is a different one. Looking away from all that will distract us and focusing our eyes on Jesus, who is the author and perfecter of faith, the first incentive for our belief and the one who brings our faith to maturity, who for the joy of accomplishing the goal was set before him endured the cross, disregarding the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God, revealing his deity, his authority, and the completion of his work. That was the Christ mind picture. I mean, that's a pretty good one. I don't usually think that far in the future. You know, we do 10-year goals. At work this week, we're going to work on a 10-year plan. You know, but I'm thinking about. I mean, this is a long time plan Jesus had that he envisioned, he focused, who for the joy that was set before him, has to be something that's tangible to us, that you can take through any situation. It's sort of like you ever tried to pull a beach ball underwater? You're in a pool or in the ocean, and you try to lay on it, you know, and if you let it go, what's going to happen? Boop! It's going to float up and pop out of the water, right? That's sort of how joy is. It's always going to take you to the top. See, Job regained his joy and regained his life. It was even better the next time. Jesus Christ's life is even better than it was the first time. And he lived perfect. It's hard to get better than perfect. But even perfect, he wasn't treated with very much respect. See, joy is our calm and positive focus when all hell is breaking loose around us. Remember, joy isn't happiness. Now we're going to see how Paul understood the raw power of joy. Joy is not happiness. Joy is a focus so clear, so deep, so ingrained, yet so peaceful that all hell breaking loose can't shake you of your ultimate goal. Like I said before, joy is peace under pressure. Aren't those usually the best athletes? People who can, no matter what's going on, they're winning, they're losing, they can just keep their head together and score, do something. You know, how did Paul maintain his focus when he was chained up in prison? Now, Paul was in prison in Rome during a time that when prison was not a place to correct one's behavior. Paul knew that a stay in a Roman prison usually ended in death. He knew it. Most people died. It was not for correction. It's just to hold you till trial. And the Romans, they had some tough laws. It was really, like I said the other week, it's obey or die. Obey or die. And they did this for 1,000 years, the Romans. 1,000 years. Our country hadn't even been around 1,000 years. You know, there was a financial planner from a different firm that visited our office twice this past week, and I wondered why he was coming over. Because you see, he's sort of the competition. And both times he brought us a big bag of delicious fruit that was grown locally. It was great stuff. But he wanted to talk. And he was a delightfully positive guy, well-dressed, decent-looking. And it turned out that his business partner outsmarted him out of $250,000. And it was done in a way so slick that he can't prosecute the guy. He basically gave it to him, but didn't realize he was giving it to him. And I asked him how he stays so positive. And he said something like, I'm a man of faith. I know how to maintain my focus, and giving helps me keep my head together. So that's why he was coming over to talk to us. He said, you guys look positive. You're always talking positive about each other. I don't get that in my office. You know, the man came over to his competitor's office, us, and wanted to spread some love and hand out some fruit. Isn't that what we want to do? You know, we want to spread the love. We want to show the fruit of the Spirit by walking at that level. It's sort of nice. And we're going to see how Paul used every tool in his book, every life experience to help him spread the love and reach his life goals. We're going to see how Paul used everything that he was, everything that he'd been taught, everything he'd ever done, and everything he ever believed to help him maintain his positive believing by maintaining his joy. See, joy kept Paul alive and alert during his imprisonment, and joy will do the same for us. We can't even imagine what a Roman prison would be like. You know, it isn't like the pictures you see in children's books where he's just in somebody's house chained to a nice, clean Roman guard. The closer he got to trial, the more secure prison they would have put him in. The more stinky, the harsher the treatment. And this wasn't that long before when Philippians was written, before he finally had audience. But joy will do the same for us. We can supercharge our belief and focus with joy. Joy was Paul's prison perspective. And the book of Philippians could be called the book of joy. Because out of all the books in the New Testament, if you look up joy, rejoice, rejoicing, there's more in Philippians than anywhere else in the New Testament. Just like Job has a whole bunch of them in Job. That's why I chose that. There's more in Psalms and Proverbs, you know, but Job is very heavy weighted with joy and rejoice. And usually it's God was talking to Job about that. But now we're going to see, before we go into Philippians, I want to read one verse. And we're going to see what Paul taught about 4 or 5 years before he was imprisoned. But you'll see that he really practiced what he preached. So Romans 15:13 says, now the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, that ye may abound in hope through the power of the Holy Spirit. See, Paul knew that it's joy that allows us to overflow with hope. It's joy that allows us to overflow with hope. And without hope, you're not going to keep going. A lot of things are tied together here, if you've noticed. I'm just teaching really one word. But with joy, we know it's going to happen. We just know it. Not like you just know it when you hope you're going to win the lottery. That's not the just know it I'm talking about. I mean, it's just you absolutely, positively know it's going to happen. There's no doubt. There's no question. There's no maybe. Albert Einstein said, in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. I was reading an article about, I think it's pronounced Dachau, and it was one of the first concentration camps the Germans put up before World War II. 1935 was put up in Poland. And at that one, they housed all the clergy, because the clergy was powerful. This is Catholic, Protestant, you know, all different types. They put them all there to control them. And if they couldn't control them, they would kill them. And because they were speaking against Nazism. And of course, you know, Germans at that time didn't want you to do it. And Germany's not like that now, but at that time it wasn't a free-thinking country. You obey or you die. But one clergyman said that some of his best years of ministering was his years he spent at Dachau. And I thought, that's crazy, you know? But it's because there's the greatest needs there. The greatest needs. Winston Churchill said, a pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. It's just a mindset, folks. It's just joy. Joy is that mindset. Napoleon Hill said, opportunity often comes in disguise in the form of misfortune or temporary defeat. You know, I mean, it looks like all hell's breaking loose, but there's some gold in there somewhere. So, see, Paul was brought up to think high thoughts in good times and high thoughts in bad times. Paul thought highly of his ability to think highly. And it's something that we can all learn. Remember, Paul here, when he wrote to the Philippians from Rome, he's writing to a group of pagans. They weren't raised in the same religion he was. They didn't know what he was talking about when he talked about the Judean religion. They knew very little, and they never experienced it. You know, you're going to see that this was what he wrote was as much for him as it was for his intended or his future audience. Probably more so. Imagine being in a stinky prison where death is all around and having to try to keep yourself positive. What would you pull from? What do you do with your mind? But sometimes we get in those little mental prisons. The bummer rooms with locked doors. Philippians 3, verse 4 through 7. Though I might also have confidence in the flesh, if any other man thinketh that he hath whereof he might trust in the flesh, I more. Circumcised the 8th day, of the stock of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, and Hebrew of the Hebrews, as touching the law, a Pharisee. Concerning zeal, persecuting the church. Touching the righteousness that's in the law, blameless. But what things were gained to me, those I counted loss for Christ. See, Paul here, while in prison, talks about his heritage and his once brutal persecution of the church. And he was proud of where he came from. And he was even prouder of where he was going. He pulled the good from both the good times and from the bad times. And all these are keys that'll help us maintain a calm, focused joy, even if all hell is breaking loose around us. And we know it does sometimes. Watch what Paul pulls from to help him maintain a calm but direct focus. And we have to learn to use every life example, every life experience to help us maintain our focus so we can maintain our joy, so we can have what we really want. It's a lack of joy that really keeps us from our goals. It's deep, it's big. Who for the joy that was set before him endured. What do you have to endure? You know, here's a short list of what Paul used to keep his head together when he was in prison during probably the toughest times of life. He was of the stock of Israel, the tribe of Benjamin, Hebrew of the Hebrews. He was a Pharisee. He viciously persecuted and killed early Christians. And he thought of himself as blameless for doing that while he was doing it. You think about some of these crazies over in the Middle East. Do they think they're wrong in doing what they're doing? No. They think it's totally righteous and right. So did Paul. He also said nothing came close to his connection with Christ. And additionally, not on this list, but in other writings, he talks about the city he was from, which is called Tarsus. So all these come into play that he's going to pull from. All these things help him. You're all from different places. Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut, Texas, Alaska, wherever you're from. California, Indiana, wherever. Alabama. And every one of those makes your mind go a different place, right? If you say I'm from New York, it means one thing. If you say I'm from New York City, it means something else. If you say I'm from New Jersey, it means something different, right? If you said I went to Stephen F. Austin State University, doesn't mean anything to most people. But if I said I went to Harvard, then you have a different attitude of me immediately. See how just little things make a difference in our lives. I was raised back east. I was raised in the Southwest. I was raised out west, way in the north. I was raised on a farm. I was raised in the inner city. They all mean something different. And Paul understood this. So he used his life. This is his life. You have to use your life and do what he did, and it'll work. Remember how Jesus kept trying to get his apostles to remember? They had to keep remembering what they'd just done so they could get through this next situation. Because it's hard when life is moving fast. When you're driving that Lamborghini Hurricane at 200 miles an hour, there's no margin for error. My partner asked him, he said, "How much does this car cost?" And the professional driver said, "Let's not find out today." So all these things are going to come into play to help us maintain a calm joy, even when all hell's breaking loose, whether it's inside or outside of us. See, what you think of yourself is paramount to how far you're going to go in obtaining your goals. It's huge. And we can retrain ourselves if we've been mistrained or we mistrained ourselves. So now the tribe of Benjamin, quickly. See, most people knew that about people from Israel. They'd been successful merchants and well known around the world, the known world, for centuries. But telling him he was from the tribe of Benjamin was really a foreign concept. Would have been talking like an American Indian tribe, the Apaches or the Cherokees or the Cheyenne or the Ute Indians. Wouldn't have meant anything to them. See, the Jewish Encyclopedia talks about the tribe of Benjamin and, quote, "The tribe of Benjamin is initially described in the Bible as being very pugnacious," end of quote. Now, pugnacious means you want to fight. You want to fight. You want to get in the fray. Think about those 3 American kids on that French train recently. I mean, there was a shot. One of the French train guys ran past, woke a guy up. One of the guys says, "Let's go." And one guy just woke up and he went. And then the other 2 said, "I guess we're going." And they ran toward the gunfire. Said he didn't even think about it. And then they stopped this thing. All the people on the train and the other cars, they went as far away from this as they possibly could and crammed into the back and the front cars to get away from that. But these guys acted. They did something. They did something. They were, and the guy who choked the guy out, he'd been trained in jiu-jitsu. So he knew what he was going to do. He got behind the guy, did a chokehold, and the guy passed out. So he acted on what he knew, on some of his prior training. Paul had to use some of his prior training. The other guy was an Army National Guard, and the other one was just a friend. They were all friends since they were kids, since junior high. But they relied on, and so you think about Americans, some people think that we're obese, but this proved that Americans are the ones who are going to act in the face of pressure. Makes you proud to be an American. Other people helped. A Brit jumped in there, The French came with tissues and tried to wipe the blood off as they were choking them. They're like, what? It's funny stuff, but they acted. See, pugnacious. Now, they may not have been people who wanted to fight, but they were ready to fight. When a Judean thought about someone from the tribe of Benjamin, they thought of people ready to fight. And these were people in the past who loved to mix it up. If you're from the tribe of Benjamin, you were a very tough sort. Be like being raised in the 60s in Detroit or Chicago, or something like that. It's different. It's different. These guys were trained. They would before Paul's time, but in the past, when Israel was at more war, they trained their sons to fight both left-handed and right-handed. They could throw a spear equally well with the left hand as they could with the right hand. They could use a sword equally well with either hand. And that's life and death, folks. You have a hand that you favor, but they had to be able to do both. I worked on a construction crew once, and a guy told me, he said, you better learn to hammer left-handed, because we had to work on ladders. And he said, and you'd have to get down and move the ladder over so you could do it right-handed. So it'd be better just learn how to hammer with your left hand. And it's hard if you're not used to it, but you could master it. So they wanted them to be ambidextrous warriors. They could shoot a bow with both hands, left-handed and right-handed. And that was how people thought of the tribe of Benjamin. That's how he thought of the tribe of Benjamin. That's how Israel thought of it. Now, the people he was writing, they had no idea. Just a name. Benjamin's a weird name to the pagans from Philippi. You see, but to Paul, he hung on to that. I can handle it. I'm a warrior. I came from a line of warriors. I joke about this. Josephine's dad was raised in Italy, and they moved to New York City. He moved to New York City when he was 16, and some of his best friends were Irish, and he liked to party with the Irish, but he would always leave when they started fighting. Love, not war, I guess. But to them, fighting was just part of a party. It was, sort of closed it down, but it was part of it. But not to her dad, not to the Italians. That wasn't what they considered fun, is fist fighting after drinking. So, it's just funny, but they were known to be pugnacious at that time. Where are you from? What about you makes you proud? Is it where you're from? Is it the school you went to, the college, the high school? Did you have a great family? Did you have a bad family? We can use them for a bad example. I'm never going to do that. I'm going to do this. It doesn't matter. Look at some of the bad things they taught Paul to do, to hate the Christians to the point he murdered them and persecuted them. That's not good. He had to live with that. Imagine running into people whose family members you had killed. You think it happened to him? I would say so. Even the believers didn't like him at first. They may never have liked him, the ones who were around before his days. What's your background? Who has influenced you? How has it influenced you? Who do you relate with? What kind of music do you like? All these things come into play. What do you think about? What makes you, the powerful you? Then a Pharisee. He called himself a Pharisee. Paul mentioned how this religious upbringing to these pagans, they didn't know what it was. Pharisee, Sadducee, what's the difference? Sadducees were the upper crust. They were the political elites. They did not believe in in spiritual power. They didn't believe in angels. They didn't believe there was a devil. They didn't believe that somebody could raise from the dead. They didn't believe in the resurrection. So they probably didn't believe in the Christ, but they believed in power. Well, that wasn't Paul. Paul was a Pharisee. The Pharisees were the most common sect in Judaism. And they took the law of Moses and then they added even more laws to it. And they added even more laws. You know, Paul was raised to be over the top stricter than even Moses or God expected him to be. That's a Pharisee. If you're this religious, I'm this religious. But it also shows that he was raised to think of himself as an ambidextrous warrior, extremely versatile and totally disciplined. He was going to always go beyond the call of duty. You say do this, I'm going to do this. This is what he hung on to, his background. And that was the attitude he took when he attacked the Christians. You guys that did it this way, I'm taking it to a whole new level, this persecution thing. When he stopped doing that, then he moved the word with that same kind of vigor. Now he's got to put in his mind, he has to get out of this situation with that same kind of vigor. It helped Paul keep that calm focus of joy. Now Tarsus was his hometown. This is important because he was proud of where he came from. He wasn't raised in Israel. He was raised in basically a pagan city. But this city, it was so successful that the Romans, they were so successful in governing themselves and doing business that Rome said that they were going to allow them to govern themselves. Very unusual for the Romans to do that. And they didn't have to pay taxes because of that. And people said about somebody who lived or was a merchant in Tarsus, they said that they will prosper 5 times more than the typical merchant. So it was a prosperous city. Paul knew he was raised around people who knew how to accumulate wealth. It's like you hardly ever see a kid who's raised rich become poor, because it's just built into them. And those of us who weren't raised that way, you have to change a lot about who you are. If you're totally expecting to prosper your whole life, you're going to prosper. But if you think, I'm just going to scrap by, and that's even a little bit in your head, you're going to do a lot of scrapping by until you change that mindset. See, one of the major thoughts in Tarsus was part of its educational system called Stoicism. And this is going to be important. So the Stoic thought. And Paul was influenced by the dominant philosophy of this city. And so was the whole Roman Empire of that day. And that was this philosophy of Stoic. And they believed that destructive emotions and hurtful self-thoughts resulted from errors in that person's judgment. It was a mistake to think poorly. And they preached and believed that a person of moral and intellectual perfection would never suffer such emotions. They would never allow their minds to go there. A Stoic believes we should accept what happens without complaining or showing emotion. Basically, of course they're not Italian then, right? Yeah, but basically when a Stoic finds himself in a bad situation or thinking poorly about themselves, they accept the situation without emotion and then they commence to deal with it. And that's what we all end up doing after the emotion, right? You have emotion, but it's like, okay, now I have to deal with this. I lost my job. I got to figure this out. I got myself in debt. I need to get out. I hurt myself. What am I going to do? After we're all angry at the world. And so I'm unemotionally going to handle this situation. I'm going to go to work. That's a Stoic. That's where Paul was raised. And remember, this is when he was in prison, knowing that it could lead to death. He had to make his mind think these things. What about us? When times, there are always going to be difficulties, but when it's really difficult, what do? Well, we might want to train ourselves when it's not that difficult. Maybe make yourself smile. Train yourself to smile more. If you find yourself cussing all the time under your breath, stop it. Just stop cussing. What's the point? It just makes everybody around you uncomfortable. Nobody feels sorry for us. We want them to, but they don't. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. That was Philippians 4:8. That's Paul's training you right there. This is how he thought. Doesn't that sound stoic? It doesn't matter. You hang on to the good stuff. Hang on to the good stuff. Hang on to the good stuff. That's exactly what he did. You see, this Stoic thought made its way into Christianity, but it's right. It works. We have to be able to do this. Job had to finally turn around and do it. I got to get out of this thing. I got to get out of this ash pile and get moving again, or I'm just going to sit here and die. Isn't that what most people would want to do when you lose 10 children and all your money? When I lived in Japan when I was a kid, on January 1st, a lot of them, I don't know what they do today, but a lot of the businessmen, if they failed in business, they would commit suicide because they shamed their families. It's bizarre, but that was the culture. Imagine getting so bummed because you made some financial errors that you kill yourself. It's crazy stuff, but people do it. People do it. Philippians 4:9. Those things which ye have both learned and received and heard and seen in me, do, and the God of peace shall be with you. See, Paul's an example of how we can make it through these bad times. Philippians 4, 10 through 14 from the Message. I'm glad in God, far happier than you would ever guess. Happy that you're again showing such strong concern for me. Not that you ever quit praying and thinking of me. You just had no chance to show it. Actually, I don't have a sense of needing anything personally. I've learned by now to be quite content whatever the circumstances. I'm just as happy with little as with much, and with much as with little. I've found the recipe for being happy whether full or hungry, hands full or hands empty. Whatever I have, whatever I am, I can make it through anything in the one who makes me who I am. I don't mean that your help didn't mean a lot to me. It did. It was a beautiful thing that you came alongside me in my troubles. Doesn't that sound like Paul? Doesn't it sound like somebody from the tribe of Benjamin? Doesn't it sound like somebody who's a Pharisee? Doesn't it sound like somebody from Tarsus? Doesn't it sound like somebody who was schooled in Israel? Yes. What about you? What about your schooling? What can you take out of your life and your upbringing and your heritage and your background and your city? Even if your past seemed lousy, there's always good things that we can pull out of it. Joy is the golden theme through Philippians. Joy is the glue that holds the heart together. Joy holds our believing together. Joy holds our attention. Remember, joy is a calm delight. It's like, okay, I can deal with this. I can do it. I'm going to do it. I'm excited about doing this, about dealing with this. It's a calm delight. I understand my situation. Here I am. I'm going to deal with it. I'm in it. I see it. Now what am I going to do? That's joy. It's a calm, focused delight. It's a perpetual smile on a peaceful mind. It's a mind smile. That's joy. What do we do with our minds to maintain this calm delight? You know, there's so many verses. You know, you might want to do a study sometime on joy, rejoice, rejoicing in Philippians, and you'll see some beautiful verses. You know, but one of the on Philippians 4:4 says, "Rejoice in the Lord always." Again, I say rejoice. That's good times, bad times. All these things happened while he was in prison, but he kept his head together and he kept it positive because a lot of people were dependent on him. There was nobody doing what he was doing. Nobody on earth was doing it. Paul was it. Nobody else is writing that kind of stuff at that time. And he knew it. And he was in prison. So finally, Hebrews 12:2 again from the Message. Do you see what this means? All these pioneers who blazed the way, all these veterans cheering us on, it means we better get on with it, strip down and start running and never quit. No extra spiritual fat, no parasitic sins. Keep your eyes on Jesus, who both began and finished his race we're in. Study how he did it, because he never lost sight of where he was headed. That exhilarating finish in and with God. He could put up with anything along the way, cross, shame, whatever. And now he's there in a place of honor right alongside God, where when you find yourself flagging in your faith, go over that story again, item by item, you know, and that long litany of hostility he plowed through, and that will shoot adrenaline into your souls. Jesus knew how to do it. When you find yourself in a situation, decide how you're going to handle your problems without emotion. If you have emotion, get through it and then get to the point where you can figure it out. Then fill your heads with only positives and allow yourself to only talk about positives about yourself and your situation. Look for as many positives in the situation as you can possibly find. And then head towards your goal with no obstructions. Joy is our calm and positive focus when all hell is breaking loose around us. God bless.